On a quiet evening, inside what seemed like a completely ordinary home, a 78-year-old man sat down for dinner. The table was set, the lights were warm, everything felt normal. But what he didn't know was that this would be the last meal of his life, because sitting inside that same house were two people he trusted more than anyone else, his wife and his own daughter. And according to investigators, both of them were hiding a secret so dark it would later shock even the most experienced detectives. This wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't a sudden act. It was something much colder, something planned. And by the time anyone realized what had happened, it was already too late. From the outside, this family looked completely normal. Neighbors described them as quiet, reserved, private. A 65-year-old woman who had spent decades as a wife, her 22-year-old daughter, young, intelligent, and full of potential, and the man who had built everything for them, a father, a husband, a provider. But behind closed doors, things were very different, because sometimes the most dangerous secrets are the ones hidden inside a family. The 78-year-old man had lived a long life. He was known as disciplined, traditional, and strict. Some people respected him, others feared him. He believed in control, in structure, in doing things his way. And over time, that control began to affect the people around him. His wife, who had spent years by his side, slowly became more distant. And his daughter, who was just beginning her adult life, started feeling trapped inside expectations, inside rules, inside a life she didn't fully choose. And that feeling would eventually change everything. At first, the changes were subtle. Small arguments, short responses, silence where there used to be conversation. It wasn't loud, it wasn't obvious, but it was there. The kind of tension you don't notice right away until it's already taken over everything. The father became more controlling over time. He questioned where his daughter was going, who she was talking to, what she was doing with her life. To him, it was protection, but to her, it felt like pressure, like she couldn't breathe. And the more he tried to control things, the more she pulled away. The distance between them grew, slowly, quietly, but steadily. And in the middle of all this, the mother was watching, listening, absorbing everything. Years of frustration, years of silence, years of things left unsaid, building up, until eventually, something inside that house began to shift. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single moment, no one argument, no sudden explosion, just a slow build. The daughter started spending more time away from home, staying out later, avoiding conversations, keeping things to herself. And every time she came back, the tension was waiting for her. Questions,
judgment, control. Over time, those moments started to turn into resentment, not just toward her father, but toward the life she felt stuck in. And then, something changed. Instead of pushing back, she started talking to her mother. Late at night, quiet conversations, behind closed doors. At first, it was just venting, complaints, frustrations, things she couldn't say out loud. But slowly, those conversations became something else, more focused, more serious, and eventually, more dangerous. At some point, the conversations stopped being about problems and started becoming about solutions. Not normal solutions, not leaving, not changing, not fixing anything. Something else, something darker. According to investigators, this was the moment everything crossed the line. A thought that should have never been entertained was spoken out loud. What if he wasn't here anymore? At first, it may have sounded like a joke, or maybe just frustration taken too far. But the problem with thoughts like that is that once they're said, they don't disappear. They stay, they grow, and the more they talked about it, the more normal it started to feel. Until eventually, it didn't feel shocking anymore. It felt possible. Once the idea took hold, everything started to change. The conversations became more careful, more deliberate. They stopped speaking emotionally and started thinking logically. If something were to happen, How would it look? Would anyone question it? Would it seem natural? That's when the idea of poison came in. Quiet, invisible, hard to detect. If done right, they didn't rush. They thought about timing, opportunity, routine. They paid attention to his habits, what he ate, when he ate, how he spent his evenings, and slowly, a plan started forming, piece by piece, until it was no longer just an idea. It was something real. In the days leading up to it, nothing seemed unusual. No sudden changes, no obvious signs. From the outside, everything looked exactly the same. But inside that house, everything was different. Every conversation had a hidden meaning. Every action had a purpose. And the closer they got to that night, the quieter things became. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of silence that comes right before something irreversible happens. And when that night finally arrived, everything was already set in motion. That night, nothing felt different. The house was quiet. The routine was the same. Dinner was prepared, just like any other evening. No arguments, no tension, just silence. He sat down at the table, unaware of what had already been decided. The food looked normal, smelled normal, but it wasn't. Somewhere in that meal was something that didn't belong there. Something invisible, something deadly. Minutes passed, then an hour, and slowly, things began to change. He started feeling unwell. At first, it was small, easy to ignore, but it didn't stop. It got worse. His body reacted quickly. Confusion, weakness,
and then panic. But by that point, there was nothing he could do. What happened next happened fast. He tried to stand, but couldn't. His strength was gone. The room around him started to blur, and within a short time, he collapsed. Inside that house, everything went silent. No rush, no urgency, just waiting. And by the time help was called, it was already too late. At first, it didn't raise suspicion. He was 78. His health wasn't perfect. It looked natural, but something didn't sit right. The symptoms were unusual. The timing, too sudden. So tests were done, and when the results came back, everything changed. Traces of a toxic substance were found in his system. This wasn't natural. This was deliberate. Once the investigation began, small details started to surface. Conversations that didn't match, reactions that felt off, and then digital evidence, messages, searches, patterns. Piece by piece, the story came together, and at the center of it were two people, his wife and his daughter, not acting alone, but together. In the end, the truth couldn't stay hidden. What started as suspicion became certainty, and justice followed. But even after everything was uncovered, one question remained. How does a family reach this point? How does trust turn into betrayal? And how does a daughter become part of something like this? Because sometimes the most dangerous stories aren't about strangers. They're about the people closest to us. And maybe the most disturbing part of this story is how ordinary it all seemed from the outside. If you found this case interesting, make sure to subscribe, because there are many more stories like this that people still don't fully understand. And if this story made you think, leave a comment below. What do you believe really led to this?